One cool mechanic in Arc Raiders is that you can extract even when you're down. The fact that you can do this leads to really tense moments where you can't fight back, but you just might be able to escape. A great feeling for an extraction shooter. Come on.
Yeah. Yes.
He's coming, no!
Hello.
Oh my god, we survived. One cool mechanic in Doom the Dark Ages is what happens to the zombie enemies when you kill the rest of the enemies in any given arena. You might have noticed that when playing Doom the Dark Ages or any Doom game in the modern trilogy, you are never really hunting for enemies. They're almost always just in your way, which is kinda insane considering the size of some of these arenas present in Doom the Dark Ages. Well, the reason for this is actually really cool. Any mob that doesn't aggro on you, meaning walking towards you or shooting at you, namely the zombie enemies, will just cease to exist once you kill the rest of the enemies in that arena. This is hidden pretty well, but if you look for it, you'll spot the occasional blip. This is such a cool mechanic because it controls the pacing so well. If this were not the case, more often than not, you'll be spending your time at the end of every arena section looking for these slow-moving, mindless enemies that serve no purpose other than just for fodder for the player to slay. Another cool mechanic in Silksong is the quest system. There are 3 types of quests you can get in Silksong: quests which require you to kill enemies, quests which require you to go to a specific area to find items, or quests which require you to explore large parts of the map. These quests are a great addition to Silksong as they give players who are stuck or struggling small achievable goals to put effort towards. Like one of the first quests you get in the game, a druid gives you a quest that you can only complete if you go back to the start of the game. If you are stuck with where to go next, this is something to do. Maybe completing this quest will lead you somewhere. Or maybe you have a quest where you need to kill certain enemies. This is a great quest for getting the player to master how to tackle certain challenges. Or even a twist on the grub quest from the original game, where instead this time you have to collect fleas. Instead of just going back to the grub father whenever you come across him, instead you return to the flea caravan whenever you complete a flea quest, which is usually just collecting a certain amount of them. It's a bit of structure not seen before in Hollow Knight. Now I don't think many of us would have expected such a black and white quest system for Silksong. It's a big departure from the silent nature of Hollow Knight, but I think it's a great design decision. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and tune into GDL again for another cool mechanic. Another cool mechanic in Ball Pit is that there's a character that can just straight up turn the game into an idle game. Now there are plenty of other idle related mechanics in the game that you unlock, such as buildings that work even if you're logged off. But what came as a complete surprise to me is that there is a literal character you can pick to play the game for you if you just want to have it on in the background farming resources. Now this character isn't for everyone, it's definitely not something super fun to watch, but if you are doing something else, having it on in the background is really cool. One cool mechanic in Jump the Track is its visual novel where you unlock dialogue choices via playing Pachinko minigames. Yeah, it's a weird one. Whenever you get hit with a choice in the dialogue, you are prompted to play a Peggle-style minigame. You need to hit all the pegs of a particular type of choice in order to be able to say it. Say you want to hit back with a fierce response. You need all the orange pegs. Or if you want to be diplomatic, you need all the green pegs. Of course, you don't really know what these responses are going to be, so you are torn between doing safe shots to make sure you get the choice you want, and more risky shots to try and get all the choices before you run out of balls. On top of that, there are also actions you can take. Actions are different from dialogue choices and require you to instead get a certain score in the Pachinko minigame before you run out of balls. This mechanic is great because firstly it's a fun minigame, but secondly it gives the player a hell of a lot of agency in their choices before they have even made them. What's also great is that the game rolls with the punches. If you get one choice, 3 choices, no choices, or you fail an action, the game adjusts and you really do feel like you're playing your own way, win or lose. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and tune to GDL next week for another cool mechanic. One cool mechanic in Donkey Kong Bananza isn't just the fact that you can dig and destroy pretty much any surface, but it's why that is fun. If you didn't know, in Donkey Kong Bananza, you play as Donkey Kong and you basically just smash up the entire place. The execution of this smashing mechanic is where it really shines. Firstly, there are very little restrictions, giving the player a sense of agency where they feel like they can tackle a lot of the problems in the game with just this one mechanic. Secondly, the terrain is littered with collectibles and hidden areas that you can find as you dig, giving the player that constant feeling of rewards and progression. Thirdly, the camera, though not perfect, does an insanely good job at tracking DK, keeping focus and logically either clipping through or pushing against terrain. Legit, if they didn't get this camera as good as they did, this game would have been dead on arrival. Finally, the smashing mechanic is core to the game. Pretty much every boss, every enemy, every puzzle involves smashing. It would have been easy to make this a gimmicky traversal mechanic and nothing else, but they didn't, and that's great. One cool mechanic in Death Stranding 2 is the weather system. Many games games have weather systems of course, but the weather system in Death Stranding 2 is the most impactful and reactive weather system that I've ever seen. If you don't know, the entire point of the gameplay of Death Stranding is to get from point A to B. How you navigate through the environment is up to you. In Death Stranding 1, though the terrain was tricky and interesting enough, backtracking to and from the same points could become a bit repetitive, because the terrain is always the same. The weather system in Death Stranding 2 fixes that. If it rains, rivers which weren't there before now become obstacles. The plain of desert that you've crossed 3 or 4 times could suddenly be hit by a sandstorm. You could even get hit by lightning if you choose to brave certain weather conditions. Bottom line, the new weather system in Death Stranding 2 works simply because it adds variety to the puzzle that is getting from point A to B, which is cool. One cool mechanic in Skate Story is how the ollie works. The ollie is one of the most common mechanics in any skate game, if not every skate game. However, Skate Story does it slightly differently as well as the rest of their tricks as well. When you hold down circle to start the ollie, a quick time event appears next to the skater. If you hit the ollie in the safe zone, you get max height, and if you hit it outside of the safe zone, your height diminishes depending on the distance from the safe zone. This makes the player consider the timing of not just the ollie, but the charge time of the ollie as well. In a game where you are made of glass and every inch and every pixel matters, this mechanic, which is introduced early on, is a great way to get the player to work on an input that they will later feel like they've mastered. One cool mechanic in Promise Mascot Agency is how saving mascots work. On jobs, more often than not, mascots will get themselves into trouble. In order to get the full payout for the job, you need to go in and save them. To do this, you use hero cards. Hero cards have different stats on them. The only one you're interested in is the icon matching the health bar at the top of the screen. The number next to that icon on the card equals the amount of damage that hero card does to the health bar. You have 60 seconds and 2 turns in order to get that health bar down to 0. This mechanic is cool firstly because it adds a bit of strategy to quite a humorous part of the game, but secondly it's because of how you get these hero cards. You get these hero cards by exploring the town, speaking to people and helping them out, and in return they will help out your mascots. Exploration and this minigame on the surface aren't really tied together, but with the hero cards being the glue, it's a great motivator for players to explore and engage with NPCs and the story, which is another reason why this mechanic is so interesting. One cool mechanic in Expedition 33 is Verso's perfection mechanic. The way this mechanic works is every time Verso lands a hit or evades successfully via a dodge or parry, the perfection meter ticks up 1. Every time Verso is hit, it ticks down 1. The perfection meter starts at D and can go all the way up to S. The higher the rank Verso is on, generally, the more damage he does. Each character in Expedition 33 has their own mechanic, their own gimmick, but Verso's is so cool because it's the most connected and synergistic with the rest of the game. The entire combat system is built around understanding how the enemies work, how they attack, when to dodge, when to parry, and when to attack. Learning enemies whilst having Verso in your party not only gives you the passive effect of being better at evading, but a more tangible benefit via the perfection system. It feels like during the design process, the perfection system very much went hand in hand with the initial concept of the combat system, and it shows. Not only that, but Verso's skills also add a lot of value to the perfection system. Certain skills do more damage at and beyond certain ranks, and other skills' effects only work at certain ranks. This allows you to strategize and get the most out of any rank, which is important to avoid the feeling of sluggishness when your rank resets at the start of every battle. For example, Quick Strike, when used at rank D, gives more perfection, usually getting you to at least rank B. Adding this move to your kit and using it at the start of every fight jumpstarts your progression up the perfection rankings. One cool mechanic in Vigil is that whenever you blink in real life, you blink in the game. Vigil is a horror game that tracks your in real life blinking and translates that into the game. In the game, there are 2 key systems which work with this mechanic. Firstly, the eye scanners that are dotted around the level. You need to keep your eyes open whilst this scanning process happens. But secondly, and more importantly, every time you look away from the monster chasing you, they move. If you keep your eyes open in real life, they stay still, but every time you blink in real life, they move. This mechanic is obviously incredibly technically impressive and interesting, but gameplay wise it uses a periphery which isn't standardly used, especially in indie games, and uses it to immerse the player further in the experience. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and tune into GDL again for another cool mechanic. One cool mechanic in Spilled is how the upgrades work. The aim of Spilled is to clean the ocean of oil and rubbish. To do this you have to scoop it up with your scooper at the front of the boat. The oil goes into a tank at the back of the boat and you have to drop it all off at a bigger boat in the area to empty the tank and get money. The 3 ways you upgrade your boat are increasing the size of the scooper, increasing the size of your tank, and increasing your speed. If you increase the size of your scooper, you can scoop more quickly. If you increase your speed, you can get around quicker. And if you increase the size of your tank, you can stay out for longer without having to offload your oil at the bigger boat. If you upgrade your scooper, you'll get more oil quicker, meaning you'll fill up your tank quicker. So you'll also want to upgrade your tank. But if you upgrade your tank, you'll want to get around quicker to fill up your tank quicker. See how it all interconnects? This very simple upgrade mechanic, which just affects 3 variables attached to the player character, creates a very satisfying and rewarding gameplay loop for the player for the game's hour-long runtime. One cool mechanic in Blueprints is the way the terminals work, specifically the security and the laboratory terminals. The security terminal does 2 really cool things. It allows the player to 1. Change the security level in the mana from low to high, and 2. Change the offline mode of keycard doors. What changing the security level does, it is increases or decreases the chance of keycard doors spawning in Blueprints. Keycard doors meaning doors which require keycards. If you do not have a keycard, you will want this to be low, but if you do have a keycard, you will actually want this to be high, as adding more keycard doors actually reduces the chance of finding a locked door which requires a key, as both keycard doors and locked doors increase in likelihood the further you move up the mana. Changing the offline mode of keycard doors to be unlocked, alongside turning off the power to the keycard system using the utility room, means that all the keycard doors can be unlocked without a keycard. Again, then changing the security level to be high means that in theory you should need to use less keys overall. Both settings are really powerful tools for progression depending on your circumstance. The laboratory terminal allows you to mix and match cause and effects. The player is presented with 3 causes and 3 effects. The player can choose any from the left side and any from the right, but only one of each. This will only be in effect for that run, so the player wants to try and tailor this new curated rule to the run they are on, which adds a lot of variety, replayability, and strategy. Another cool mechanic in Demon School is how the AP system works. AP is action points, and you have 10 to spend each round across your entire roster. The first trick this game uses is that for every action one specific character does, their next action will cost 1 more AP. So if one character, Faye for example, does 1 move, then 1 attack, then 1 move, their next move, being their 4th attack, will cost 4 AP to do. This, coupled with the fact that you can use any character in any order, really adds a significant layer of depth to what moves you do in what order with what characters. As the more you use one character, the more expensive using that one becomes for that round. Really cool. One cool mechanic in Absolum is the fact that you can combo enemies even when they are already dead. This is great for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's fun. Fun in abundance, some might say. But secondly, combo directly contributes to your XP, which is critical for progression in this roguelike brawler. So this mechanic actually adds an interesting choice and a bit of risk reward. Can you risk continuing to combo enemies whilst others are on your back? Because if you stop, then their body will be gone forever. One cool mechanic in Lonely Mountain Snow Riders is what is left behind after every time you die. In Snow Riders, the objective is simply to ski to the bottom of the slope without dying. The player is not in control of the camera whatsoever, and oftentimes the game purposefully makes it so you cannot see more than a few meters ahead of you. So how can the player overcome this? Progression through failure, and this is where the cool mechanic lies. When you ski through snow, you leave tracks behind you. When you die and respawn at the checkpoint, those tracks are still there. That means that if you went down a path you thought was too difficult, or you might have thought there'd be a quicker way on a different path, simply just don't follow the tracks in the snow. These tracks are like a heat map of exploration from one checkpoint to another, constantly adding to the amount of information the player has about the environment they are in. Now this is a cool mechanic, because it's also an important mechanic. Due to the way the camera works and the speed in which the game plays, if these tracks did not exist, then it would make the game frustratingly hard. So this mechanic's value add to the game is just insane. One cool mechanic in Don't Look is that you play the game entirely blindfolded. Now that sounds like a nightmare at first, and believe me, it is. However, as you wander aimlessly around the first room, you realise something. Firstly, if you hit a point of interest, which is usually indicated by light or sound, you get a picture of the room on the screen. Now the aim of any room is to always get out of that room, so the puzzle becomes, how can I get from where I know I am, which is say the fireplace, to the door in the picture? The more you play, the more the speckles of light, sounds and faded shapes become more and more useful, and you really start to feel like you can make your way around the mansion you are trapped in despite not being able to see. Almost completely removing sight from the player is always such an interesting mechanic, but this one in particular I think is done pretty well.
Now this might be the hardest game I've ever had to try and make a video on, because one cool mechanic in Midnight Murder Club is the fact that you play the entire game in the dark. Midnight Murder Club is a first-person shooter where the absence of light is the real enemy. The downsides of this design decision are clear. Of course it's hard for players to see, but also it's a nightmare for content creators, which makes me think that this game could have been a cult classic if it was released 20 years earlier. The advantages of this design decision are truly amazing. It elevates the already amazing sound design by having the players rely on it to move around rooms, hear enemies, and speak to them via proximity chat. Additionally, any light that is introduced into the scene, such as a light from gunfire, adds so much tension and suspense to any encounter. It makes the player think twice about shooting as it exposes their position. Finally, in the minute-to-minute gameplay, there is always an interesting decision to make. Do they use the torch to see where they are going, or do they not to avoid being detected? Great design, and I wish more people played it.
One cool mechanic in Hades 2 is the secret way enemies spawn. Unlike other wave-based dungeon crawlers, Hades 2 spawns waves in a strange way. It isn't just kill all the enemies and wait for the next wave, it's actually pretty dynamic. To trigger the next wave, you could have killed just 50% or 70% or even 90% of the enemies in the room. Now, I've logged a lot of data on this to see if there is a rule around health pools or types of enemies, but it seems to be pretty bespoke for every encounter, meaning that the developers would have tuned each new wave trigger based on playtesting and intuition by hand, which is really cool. This wave spawning mechanic removes downtime and keeps up with the tension, but also it makes those moments where you do get a brief break between waves even more relieving. One cool mechanic in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is the fact that if you choose certain dialogue options, they actually give you stats for those particular categories. For me, this is insanely cool for a role-playing game, as it just sort of works the opposite of how other games do it. So conversations in Kingdom Come Deliverance are context first, meaning that unlike other RPGs, if you have high stats for one stat, it doesn't mean you will always succeed. Instead, it's about choosing the right dialogue option for the context and for your character, and if you're successful, that stat increases. This means that the more you pick the same options, meaning the more you roleplay consistently, you will become even better at role-playing in that particular way. A self-fulfilling gameplay loop which is incredibly rewarding and very well executed.